On this show, we've been telling you about the growth of the India story, the rising GDP, the big new infrastructure projects, the digital transformation, and so on. But we're also going to keep looking at the next steps. What else needs to be done? How can India become a fully developed economy in a time-bound period? There are many such steps that can be discussed and debated, the pros and cons thought through, and then, hopefully, action taken. Take foreign exchange, for example. It once used to be the most scarce of commodities. Today, India has $600 billion. As talk of de-dollarization gathers ground and India takes a more central role in the global economy, is it time to change our attitude to forex? Is it, for example, time to think about capital account convertibility? Two of the biggest experts in the area are about to join me to discuss that. But first, the immediate trigger for this debate. The government recently amended the rules to bring international credit card spends under LRS, or the Liberalized Remittance Scheme. Beginning July the 1st, if you spend money abroad using a credit card, it will attract a 20% TCS, or tax collected at source. You'll get it back eventually if you have to get a refund, but at least in the beginning stages, there will be a TCS. Now, this entire move was met by much criticism, after which the government made some changes and said this will only apply to expenses more than 7 lakh rupees per annum. Now, the government's rationale for this move is that while payments made by debit cards were already covered under LRS, expenditures under credit cards were not accounted for, which led to some people exceeding the $250,000 limit and bypassing the LRS rules. The government says that the new system will remove the differential treatment between debit cards and credit cards. The total expenditure under LRS will be properly captured, and will also be able to make sure that nobody is trying to subvent things or people aren't sending undisclosed income abroad. Now, critics say that a better idea would be to remove restrictions altogether and that none of this is actually required. But let's step away from the limited debate around LRS and around these credit cards and take a look at a bigger question. Many experts have argued that all of these restrictions and controls around foreign exchange are in any case a relic of the past. A past where India was a much smaller economy and a country with very limited foreign exchange reserves. In 2023, the situation is very different, and hence, perhaps our entire attitude needs to change. Perhaps we need to think big. Perhaps we even need to consider steps towards capital account convertibility. Dr. Bhalla, great to have you back in Delhi, fresh from Washington after running a lot of the IMF. Of course, thanks for being here. I want to talk to you, first of all, about the broader question, which is capital account convertibility and whether we should head there. But first, you've also been writing about LRS and these changes and whether it should be 7 lakhs or not 7 lakhs and credit card or not credit card. So let's start with that. What's your sense of some of these changes and what do you think should be done?
I think we are definitely at a stage where the value contribution of these restrictions is negative, is zilch. Negative because it's unnecessary. I don't know whether harassment is too strong a word, but unnecessary bureaucratic interference for data that the government already has. So in that sense, what's the logic behind it? And, the 7 lakhs should be removed to no amount. You can send in whatever, as long as it is done through legal channels, which is all that we are talking about here. We do not know what happens in illegal channels. The government is concerned about deducting TDS on income that people have already earned and that they are legally allowed to spend abroad. If we go above the $250,000 per person limit, then that's a violation of the laws. And the government should clearly act on those. I happen to think that, 250,000 was brought in 2015 or 16. The Indian economy has been growing quite robustly. And maybe that should be expanded to eventually not have it at all. That's what the mark of a developed economy is. And we clearly have very reasonable aspirations and ambitions to be a developed economy. And I think that's what we should be moving towards.
So let's come back to the question of capital account convertibility. That's, of course, the main subject I want to talk to you about. Is it time for India, or is it premature to say, look, there's de-dollarization happening? The Chinese are trying very hard to make the yuan an exchange currency of some sort or the other. Now, there's no reason why India, as the third largest economy in the world a few years from now, we don't necessarily, we shouldn't be having a weak currency there. We don't need to be worrying about protecting it. We don't have to worry perhaps about foreign exchange to the same level. So say, move towards capital account convertibility. Let's do it in a phased manner so there are no external shocks. But at least let's start thinking about it and planning for it.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize what you just added. Do it in a phased manner. Absolutely. That was the original intent 25 years ago, to do it in a phased manner. That was the intent 20 years ago or 18 years ago, to do it in a phased manner. That's the official policy of the RBI, of the government of India, states. So absolutely, we should be now, we have not made any progress towards capital account convertibility since 2006 or 2015 when we expanded the LRS. And now we should move further in that direction to allow, so that maybe if you want me, I would say the target should be no more than a decade from now, possibly by the end of this decade, we should have full capital account convertibility. And the time to start is now.
All right. So let's try and get the roadmap from you. Let's say we want to move towards capital account convertibility 10 years from now. I mean, remember, we've just overtaken Britain. 10 years from now, India could be double the size of the British economy. So we'll be right up there. So by that time, perhaps we should be thinking about capital account convertibility.
I'm making it sooner, 2030.
2030, okay, even better. 7 years from now, we want to move towards capital account convertibility. Now, if that is what we are doing, then what are the policies we should be setting into place? But obviously, in that situation, capital account convertibility, you're not going to be having LRS and $250,000 limits, or it means you can do anything. You can send billions of dollars abroad, get billions of dollars back inside, complete freeing up. That's what capital account convertibility would mean. What do we have to do from now?
Some of it we've discussed. Now you're asking for a roadmap, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position to outline the roadmap. That's for the government to do.
Okay, so your suggestions of a specific roadmap.
Yeah, suggestions would make to the government. First, the very simple step of this credit card business, 7 lakh business, goes out of the window tomorrow. So it should have happened yesterday. So that's number one. Then you say that, listen, perhaps in the beginning, the other one that the government has been trying to do, which is very important, that foreigners can buy our treasuries. Okay? That is very much a necessary part of capital account convertibility, that our treasuries are open. China has opened it, and etc. And we will have to open our bond markets to foreigners. Okay? That's the second step. Hopefully that, and the government has explicitly talked about it. It was to come in last year or whatever, some suggestion. And so that should happen. I hope it will happen.
Okay, what about Indians sending money abroad? What happens with that?
I would phase it to, maybe increase it every year as a token right now, maybe 500,000 in a year or two, then 1 million, and then it's completely open up. Has to be done in a phased manner. But target is 2030, you'll be able to send out as much money as you would like.
All right, Dr. Bhalla, the advantages of what you're saying are clear. You're saying recognize your skills, understand your skills, have confidence in yourself. But now, what are the risks? Because I'm sure if the government is looking at this entire discussion and saying, well, that's a nice idea, but there could be problems, there could be threats, there could be risks. So what are the risks?
Okay, so what can go wrong? We've got $600 billion worth of reserves. Let me expand on that a little bit. What the country's exchange rate or whether they have balance of payments problems, are measured by the ratio of reserves, of imports to reserves. How many months of imports does a country have? Months of imports in terms of reserves. Okay? India is amongst the top 5 countries in the world, excluding the oil companies. So, so I don't know what can go wrong, quite honestly, because let us see what we all agree on, or what the risks are, to put it in your terms. What we all agree on is that everyone, hopefully even the opposition, that the Indian economy is quite robust, number one. Education has increased, though manifold, though I think we still have some distance to go on improving the quality of education. But human capital of the Indian economy is considerably better than it ever was. Okay. So growth, let's look at growth and human capital and investment. Our investment rates are in the mid-30s. Our human capital is good. And therefore, our growth rate is the best in the world. The best. Okay. So what can go wrong? You tell me.
All right, Dr. Bhalla, you make a cogent argument. I think, look, I'm glad that this debate has at least started, because as India has to grow, if India has to become one of the most developed, one of the most prosperous nations in the world, which I think is everyone's aim, it's important to debate and discuss and have all of these conversations out there so that they can actually be debated. I'm sure there will be people who have a different point of view. We would love to hear those different points of view. Please send them to us. We would like to see what the benefits are, what the pros are, what the cons are. And it's only with that debate and that discussion that we will be making the correct policies and have the right steps to take the India story forward. Thanks, Dr. Bhalla, for joining us. But I'm going to start by getting another voice in to really brainstorm the possible steps that need to be taken or that can be taken towards capital account convertibility, and whether we need to be easier in general in the entire question of foreign exchange. Who better to talk to than Rama Subramaniam Gandhi, who's the former Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank of India, who's looked very closely at currency management and is the right person, therefore, to give his views. Now, Mr. Gandhi, thank you so much for joining us. The subject of rules and regulation, LRS, has been something that's, of course, been discussed in the last couple of weeks. So, Mr. Gandhi, is there a view that as we're moving towards becoming a more developed economy with plentiful foreign exchange reserves, is this the right time to start getting a roadmap for foreign exchange, more freedom there, perhaps even capital account convertibility?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share some little thoughts on the issue. First of all, the conservation of foreign exchange was an objective under FERA, not under FEMA. Under FEMA, that approach has completely changed. It is not conservation of foreign exchange, rather facilitating foreign exchange transaction by residents and non-residents in a much more comfortable or easier way. That's why when the FEMA came, that was a very big shift between FERA and FEMA. So over this 20 years, 23 years since FEMA has come into being, consistently, Reserve Bank and along with the government has taken the stance that we will be going more and more into easing the foreign exchange operations to be carried out by the citizens. But it won't be fully completely left to the market and citizens. There's full convertibility is a process. Someday we may reach, but every step will be closer to that. But at any point in time, so far, we have not yet come to that conclusion that we are fully ready for it.
You know, sir, you're right in saying that FEMA is more about management. It's not entirely about restrictions as well. But some of the things that we are seeing, like this entire debate over LRS, LRS is a limit. You can only send $250,000 in a certain year. And there could be restrictions in other areas, whether it comes to ODI or other such changes. Now, as we move forward towards more and more liberalization and potential convertibility, do you think that even these restrictions should be progressively, systematically, in a phased manner, eased, liberalized?
Some 6 months before, Deputy Governor Ravi Shankar has mentioned that India is now may be ready for further relaxation relating to all these parameters, including internationalization of the rupee. So that way, it's time to do that. Yes, individually, the $250,000 which we have fixed, it is quite some time before, almost, I would think that it is about 10 years, near about that. So but obviously that ceiling can be certainly be revisited, given the position that aspirations of the Indian citizens, because we have now have more disposable income, that would mean that we have more savings. So the savings, one would want to have investment, a dispersed way of investing, not only within India, and opportunities that is available elsewhere also should be made available for Indian citizens. So that way, the LRS, by the way, it is meant for, primarily meant for current account transaction. It was not, it should not be seen as that is meant for capital account related. It is permitted under that, but by definitely an investment orientation, that by Indian citizens to invest, facilitate their investment abroad, that could be a separate ceiling, or the current ceiling of 250 under LRS could be enhanced to facilitate that. I agree with that, that we should be thinking in those terms.
So, sir, when you're looking at this from the point of view of the Reserve Bank of India and the fact that this should be a phased process, so it should be controlled in some way, what is the rationale in 2023 because of all of these controls? India obviously has a fair amount of foreign exchange. So is this essentially to make sure there's no hot money flows, there's no destabilization as problems happen in the global economy? Those external factors should not cause disruption in India. Is that essentially the reason why we do have these controls in the first place today?
Right. If you recall, Tarapur committee, both in number 1 and number 2 committees have consistently recommended there are certain preconditions before we think about relaxing further. One is inflation control, that it starts from there. Then we the government fiscal deficit situation. Then the banking sector health, the asset quality, and so these three are some of the common expectations that we should be comfortable around these parameters before we think about opening up more. Today, touch wood, we have reached that kind of stage. Inflation, because of the inflation targeting MPC, it is more or less we are able to bring it to single digit and low single digit kind of situation. So inflation, fairly, we can believe that it is manageable. Then the government fiscal deficit also, thanks to last 2-3 years of consistent enhancement in the tax collections and the administration, the government was able to keep it within the targets which they have announced around the budget time. And going forward also further consolidation is expected. So reasonably that also we can believe that we are in a pretty good situation. CAD, of course, that is always the issue because we are yet to really have a leapfrog in export earnings. Now that's what we would ultimately would want to have export surplus that we have not yet reached. That would still remain a negative proposition, and thanks also to our dependency on oil. So CAD perhaps will still remain an area where we have not yet reached the desired position.
All right, Mr. Gandhi, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Thank you so much.